You've never once, not for a single second of your life, questioned it. That the ground beneath your feet will hold. You lean your full weight onto a stair you haven't even looked at. You trust a floor you cannot see is solid, because it has never once buckled, split, or given way beneath you. Not on the sidewalk, not in your kitchen, not anywhere you have ever stood. In the entire 100,000 years human feet have walked this planet's surface. Now imagine the ground simply opens. Your mind immediately jumps to an apocalyptic film spectacle. Vast, bottomless chasms yawning across city centers, swallowtail faults consuming skyscrapers whole, and blinding columns of molten magma erupting through torn asphalt in cinematic fury. It is a terrifying, dramatic vision, but geophysics presents a far more intricate, widespread crisis than swallowed landmarks. The true, lethal threat of a fracturing crust does not begin with dramatic abysses swallowing entire suburbs. It begins with the micro-shear of a surface that can no longer maintain continuous structural tension. Long before a crack grows wide enough to swallow a vehicle, the subterranean spine of human infrastructure snaps in tens of thousands of places simultaneously. High-pressure natural gas mains shear beneath suburban streets, venting invisible, highly volatile gas clouds into quiet neighborhoods. Municipal water trunks split open, draining city reservoirs directly into deep mantle fractures before a single drop reaches a household tap. Underground high-voltage power lines strip apart under millimeter-level displacement, severing the energy conduits of entire states. Aquifers that took millions of years to pool drop into newly created subterranean fissures, causing the land above to subside unevenly, tilting building foundations until load-bearing walls shear like dry bone. The planet does not need to split into isolated continents to destroy our world. It only needs to lose its seamless continuity, turning every foundation, bridge, and pipeline into an unmoored artifact floating on an unstable world. To understand how humanity confronts a world where the ground itself becomes an adversary, we must journey beyond seismic maps and enter the fracturing spaces, where ordinary people attempt to stand upright, from flooded lowland ports in Western Europe to shifting volcanic highlands in South America. A sharp, metallic groaning resonates through the concrete piles of a shipping terminal in Rotterdam, Netherlands, as the deep harbor floor shifts 4 centimeters to the west. On the rain-slicked deck of a stationary container crane, a veteran dock supervisor watches a 3-kilometer stretch of reinforced concrete quay wall crack down its center with a sound like a distant cannon shot. The water in the basin does not swirl into a dramatic whirlpool. Instead, the harbor slowly drains into deep bedrock fractures, leaving massive container vessels resting at severe, unrecoverable angles on exposed silt. Around him, dockworkers silently lay down their radios, realizing that the intricate choreography of global trade, built entirely on the assumption of fixed ports and level rails, has dissolved in a single afternoon. In the terminal office, a paper cup of coffee sits on a desk, its black surface vibrating in tiny, endless concentric circles under the dim fluorescent overhead light. 2 weeks later, high on the slopes of the Andes in Quito, Ecuador, the low, sulfurous hiss of subterranean pressure escaping through a newly opened fault line breaks the quiet dawn. An elderly archivist stands on the cobblestone square outside a colonial basilica, watching thin wisps of vapor rise quietly from hairline cracks creeping across the stone plaza. The mountains around the city have not collapsed, but the subterranean tension has shifted the earth just enough to unalign the ancient stone archways, causing heavy masonry blocks to groan under unfamiliar shear forces. Pilgrims who once climbed the mountain paths to pray now gather in silence, staring at the ground beneath their knees, suddenly aware that even the most sacred stone temples are merely delicate balance structures riding on a restless earth. He kneels to touch a crack in the ancient paving stones, feeling a faint, warm jet of odorless volcanic gas whisper against his fingertips before dissipating into the thin mountain air. If you are watching this right now and feeling a quiet disquiet take root, that is a completely natural reaction to witnessing the collapse of our most basic assumption. We are exploring a world stripped of its permanent floor, a scenario that forces us to re-examine how deeply our laws, our architecture, and our daily trust rely on a motionless Earth. Stay with me, because as we push deeper into this fracturing landscape, the narrative shifts from how our surface structures crumble to how small communities engineer new ways to survive on a world in perpetual motion. By the second month, inside a converted industrial warehouse in Almaty, Kazakhstan, a team of structural engineers completes the assembly of a low-profile, flexible living module resting on heavy steel air suspension bladders. Outside, the valley floor is crisscrossed by jagged step faults that have severed the city's gas and electrical conduits, leaving traditional high-rises abandoned and leaning like crooked teeth against the Tian Shan Mountains. Inside the warehouse, the engineers monitor laser alignment sensors fixed to the building's steel trusses, watching real-time ground displacement readings bounce on digital screens. They have re-engineered salvaged pneumatic shock absorbers from heavy mining trucks to sit beneath living quarters, allowing their micro-community to absorb continuous ground tremors without structural failure. A young technician sits on a folding stool, carefully soldering a copper wire to an early warning tilt sensor, her hands steady despite the low, sub-audible hum vibrating through the concrete floor beneath her boots. 6 months into the crisis, near the barren mud volcano fields outside Baku, Azerbaijan, a shift leader at a subterranean gas extraction complex guides 50 workers through a reinforced steel survival vault carved directly into a resilient shale formation. The surface above has become an uninhabitable labyrinth of venting mud ridges and shifting fissure lines that release heavy pockets of methane and carbon dioxide into the low air. Down here, protected by flexible rubberized joint liners and heavy steel ring segments that can flex up to 15 degrees without snapping, the workers monitor life support scrubbers powered by deep geothermal pressure taps. They live in a world where every step must be calculated, where doorways are built with telescoping accordions to absorb mountain building stress. The supervisor shines his flashlight down a dark access shaft, where a heavy lead plumb line hangs perfectly still inside a steel sleeve, its tiny tip hovering a millimeter above a calibrated brass grid. To understand how human structures can endure on a surface that refuses to remain static, we must look at the sophisticated physics of seismic base isolation and flexible structural engineering. Modern superstructures in fault-prone regions do not achieve safety by attempting to overpower the movement of the Earth through rigid mass. They survive by disconnecting themselves from it. When you lean your full weight onto a stair without looking, your nervous system relies on the absolute rigidity of the step to return that force cleanly. But advanced structural engineering operates on the opposite principle, decoupling. By placing laminated rubber bearings, fluid dampers, and spherical sliding isolators between a building's foundation and the shifting bedrock, engineers allow the earth below to move up to several feet in any direction, while the structure above remains nearly motionless, riding the motion like a ship on ocean swells. In a world where the planetary crust splits on a global scale, surviving communities adapt this exact technology to utility networks, replacing rigid steel gas, pipes, and water trunks with flexible, corrugated polymer conduits and ball joint linkages that can stretch, twist, and bend without rupturing, preserving the vital arteries of life, even as the ground moves beneath them. When we step back to examine a world cracking open, we come to realize that the illusion of a solid, immutable Earth is merely a matter of human perspective. To our brief lifespans, the ground feels like an eternal foundation. But to geophysicists who study the deep history of our planet, the crust has always been a thin, dynamic mosaic of tectonic plates floating on a slow, churning sea of semi-molten rock. The continents we inhabit have split apart, collided, and fractured dozens of times across geological epochs. What this speculative scenario reveals is not that the Earth is fragile, but that human civilization built its entire existence on a momentary pause in a 4 billion year process of relentless planetary transformation. Our true resilience lies not in the concrete and steel we anchor into the rock, but in our capacity to anticipate change, re-engineer our tools, and learn how to inhabit a dynamic world. The next time you step onto a flight of stairs or lean against a stone wall, take a moment to feel that quiet, reassuring resistance beneath your feet. It is an unthinking trust built over generations, a fleeting moment of stability on a restless planet. And as long as the ground beneath you continues to hold, the story is still being written.